My name is Ross Becker. The ground rules for this interview are that O.J. Simpson has agreed to answer any and all of my questions. Neither he nor his lawyers have seen or been told those questions in advance. I've agreed not to ask Mr. Simpson questions concerning his children, his personal finances, about any privileged conversations between Mr. Simpson and his attorneys, or any questions about any post-trial legal matters. The only people in the room during this interview are the camera operators, O.J., and myself. Also, a copy of this interview will be kept in the custody of my attorney as a guarantee that it will be disseminated exactly as it was recorded in real time. O.J., before we start to unravel this bizarre odyssey that you have gone through, why are you doing this interview? Why did you agree to this interview under these circumstances?
Well, I think obviously it's well known that I've been wanting to talk for quite a while. When the case was over, I wanted to talk immediately. Unfortunately, I had some new lawyers, and I was involved in another litigation, a civil suit. They had some concerns because they hadn't really spent any time with me. They had a lot of concerns that anything I might say may be used against me, and not knowing me and not understanding how I see things and how I speak, and really not, even though they followed the case, not being totally up on the case, they were a little reluctant for me to speak at that time. So was most of my lawyers. They felt that I was at a time where I was still coming down from an emotional, this emotional thing.
Are you doing this for the money too?
Oh, obviously. I've spent a career collecting a certain wealth. A lot of people have relied on me over those years, family, in-laws, and I've had to use all that up, all those savings up, to defend myself.
Were you coached? Were you coached at all on what to say here today?
Not at all. I think one thing that my new lawyers found, once they sat down with me, and they did sit down with me, they did interview me, and in the course of firing questions at me, they felt pretty good about me as a client.
About letting you go and talk and say it the way you want to say it.
Want to say things, yes.
I want to begin by talking about two very important moments, and both of them happened in the courtroom. One was the day you stood before Judge Lancito and you said that you were 100% not guilty. Now, ultimately, of course, the jury agreed with that, but the truth is that in the minds of millions of people around the world, you killed Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. They believe that. That's their perception. And because you had a lot of money and you had some innovative lawyers, you're going to get away with it. Can you live with that public perception in the minds of some people?
Well, I don't think doing this tape is going to change a lot of minds. Basically, I think the people who have had faith in me and believed in me, hopefully I'll justify that and give them some fodder so that when they're out debating with people, have a little more ammunition. But I also think that I believe in people. I've always got along with people. I've always found people interesting, and I think basically people are honest and they want to be fair. And I think as this trial goes on and as I speak more, some truths will come out that didn't come out during the course of this trial. I felt that during the trial there was a lot of misrepresentations made by the prosecution that for whatever reason the media used. Maybe it was a better story. I realize now that it's the story, the ratings are more important than the truth, and that's something that has become abundantly clear to me through this ordeal, and especially since this ordeal has been over, and as we speak, hopefully that will become abundantly clear to a lot of our viewers.
You were a very public man. Your whole career was out in the public, but the question is, you can never be that way again, can you?
Well, I don't want to be that way again, to be honest. I like me. I like my image. I felt a certain responsibility. I had heroes when I was a kid growing up, and I felt a certain responsibility, and I thought I did well with that responsibility. I wasn't perfect, like no hero, no American, no human is perfect, and I had my faults, but despite what I see some of my distractors say, I don't think I went out of my way to work on my image. I think everyone who knew me knew the OJ they saw on TV. The OJ that they work with is the OJ that the guy that they run around with and hang out with. Most of the people that I've ever worked with in my life have become friends, and they will say I'm the same guy.
The other moment in the trial that we all remember, of course, is the reading of the verdict. Not guilty. That moment, when you heard those words, what went through your mind?
I was really numb. I must admit, up until the day before, I thought it would be a hung jury. I thought one or two of the jurors would not vote for acquittal. And I was real concerned about that because Johnny Cochran had told me it'd be maybe 2 years before he could come back to the case. I knew what Sheck and Neufeld, these guys had other lives. So,
you looked happy and you looked relieved.
Well, I was relieved, but I was almost numb. I was fighting my emotions. The one thing I didn't want to do was lose, I don't say lose my cool, but I can say this. I looked at Van Adder, and if Van Adder would have looked at me, I would have lost my cool.
Philip Van Adder.
Yeah, Phil Van Adder. I would have lost my cool, and I was just trying to tell myself that I had gotten through this. I tried to do it with some kind of dignity, and I didn't want to lose it at that moment.
Did you think about Nicole?
At that moment, no. No, at that moment, I was thinking about I was going to hug Sydney and Justin. I was going to hug Arnell and Jason. I had gone, what, 16 months when I hadn't been able to touch anybody that I loved. I can touch lawyers, but nobody that I can love, and it was real tough. And I'm a toucher, I'm a hugger. Everyone who knows me knows I'm a very affectionate person. And my kids, my son and I, he's 25, we kiss. You know, my young son and I, we kiss. Sydney, Arnell, we're kissers and huggers. And I think more than anything, I was saying I was gonna see my kids. I knew my older kids were strong. It was my younger kids I was most concerned about. And on my mind that day was I actually had planned to walk out of that courtroom, take a van or a car right down to Laguna and hug my kids.
A tough question, but you knew, obviously, Nicole very well. She was your wife for a long time. What do you think she would have said about the verdict that day?
Oh, Nicole would have stood by me. Nicole, there's so many people who are alleged friends. The interesting thing about it, Nicole knew a lot of the weaknesses of the people who are, I think, benefiting from what has happened here. And Nicole would have been, you know, like she always was with me when there was a problem, in our family, that the two of us, no matter what we were going through in our lives, we always stood real strong with one another. When we were apart, something that the press don't seem to want to talk about or write about, they want to give a total opposite skew on it. Even when we were apart, when we were divorced, when we had other lives, whenever there was something major, something emotional, Nicole on a few occasions had some very serious, for her, emotional issues come up with her then boyfriends. She didn't call her mother, she called OJ. And maybe Cora Fishman, her best friend. Faye wasn't in her life at that point in time, but I was a person she came to with problems that you would be really surprised that this so-called jealous, possessive individual that this woman would come to me with problems that she had with her lovers.
We could talk for days and go back all over the events of the trial, the specific evidence, but let me ask you about some key questions, because people became a soap opera for people, and they followed every day of this trial, and there were nagging questions in people's minds when the verdict was announced not guilty, because things they couldn't understand. And things that they may not have had a clear picture in their mind as to why this happened. The amazing number of improbable coincidences concerning this crime that tie to you. Do you agree that there's an amazing number of improbable coincidences?
Not at all.
Not at all? Your
Not
blood,
at all.
your blood at the crime
coincidence.
scene?
I don't believe that was a coincidence.
How do you explain it?
Well, first of all, if it was my blood, which I don't believe, but if in fact it was my blood, it wasn't deposited there that night. I was not there that night. I had spent a lot of time at Nicole's house, probably more at her house than my house in the previous year. I had been there quite a bit. That's where we kept our dogs. I had been there the week previous to these murders because the dogs were fighting, and I had to go over and get one of the dogs and bring him home. But when I look at the evidence of blood, this so-called blood trail, I ask a lot of questions. First of all, I want to know why would someone like Mazzola, who collected these blood drops, who claimed in previous testimony under oath that she put her initials on each one of these bindles, but when they got the cell mark and they got the DOJ, there was no initials there. Of course, the prosecution, as they did with every witness in this case who dealt with the blood, who was on the scene that day, got her to question her own testimony. In her case, it was maybe she didn't initial those bindles. When she initialed the bindles on everything else in this case, and every other case she's done it. She testified she did in this case, and for some reason, those initials disappeared. That, Ross, and I may go on sometimes because I got so much in me that I want to say, and I may get a little long at times. That in court one day came out. The prosecution, I guess, in cross-examinations were somewhat prepared for it, and they got her to say that maybe, after she claimed she had under oath, maybe she didn't. That night, I remember Bob Shapiro saying to me, well, that'll be the big story tonight. You know, I'm watching the news that night. When I got back to my cell, there wasn't one word mentioned about it. I think the big news was some inconsequential ruling Ito had, and to me, it's things like that. That was, to me, the best example. This should have been a pivotal point.
You've talked to the jury. Was it a pivotal point?
A few of I haven't talked to the jury, but a few of them have mentioned that they found that to be strange. So they were paying attention, but that night none of the pundits spoke about that. Right. And once again, you talk about the public out there, the public got the spin that they got at night, at that, you know, once they got home at night.
But the coincidences still remain. Okay. Again, you know, whether it's yours or not, the contention, your blood at the crime scene, your blood, coincidence, here at Rockingham, found the same night of that the crime happened, and in the Bronco.
Well, if in fact that was my blood here at the home, if in fact it was, I don't find that to be such a coincidence.
Was it?
I don't think so, but I don't find that to be a coincidence. How did it get here?
Whose blood was it here at Rockingham?
If in fact it was mine, I live here at Rockingham. You know, I think you're going to be surprised at how little blood is involved in this bloody home that I hear. It's
there were drops of blood.
Drops of blood on the driveway. Yeah. If in fact it happened, if in fact I deposited it, it would have not been, certainly not after leaving Nicole's house, because I hadn't been in Nicole's house, and maybe when I was running around, I really had absolutely no answer for that. I personally, I am very skeptical about whose blood that was.
What about the victim's blood in your Bronco?
Once again, we go back to the same thing. I hear about blood being in my Bronco. I'm told that there should have been a lot more blood in the Bronco if this was the victim's blood. It amazes me that experienced criminalists could look in this car, in this Bronco, looking for blood. This is the trial of the century, the case of all time. I mean, you heard the detectives talk about that from day one, and for 2 months they can't find blood. People got in that car looking for blood on this dashboard and on the divider, I guess. I can't recall what they call that. Console. And they don't find blood. And months later they find it, they put it all together, and they say it's the victim's blood. I find it curious that there was a 4 allele drop of blood on the steering wheel that didn't come to Nicole, didn't come to Ron Goldman, didn't come to O.J. Simpson. I would submit that if they would have typed that blood drop or smudge that they saw on the door handle of the Bronco, it probably would have been a 4 allele, but they didn't. I don't understand how. I definitely went to my Bronco right before I left. I opened the door of my Bronco. I went in the Bronco. Alan Park, Cato were here at that time. Why wasn't my fingerprints on the handle of my Bronco? I submit somebody opened that Bronco, didn't want their fingerprints on it, erased it. I submit that there's no way that Mark Furman could have seen the blood spots that he claimed to have seen on the running board and stuff of that car unless the door was open. And I think that was proven. I don't think anybody disputes that you could not see those blood spots that he claimed to have seen unless he was in the Bronco.
Your hair found in the knit cap at the crime scene.
No, that's inaccurate.
It's not.
No, I mean, I'm saying it's inaccurate. No one said that was my hair. They said hair similar to, and I'll go to Hank Goldberg on that. Hank Goldberg, when he was speaking with Henry Lee about something that was consistent, I think was the word, consistent
with is what they used in court, yes.
And I'll use Hank Goldberg's words on that. Hank Goldberg said to Henry Lee, when you say consistent with, you're not saying it is.
Right.
You're not saying it's a fact. You're saying maybe it could be. And
it's another thing for the jury to consider.
Representation. There's hairs in that hat that they said wasn't consistent with mine. There's hairs that they said was consistent with mine. But I submit you can take 10 black guys, you know, and you'll find that hair consistent with probably a number of them.
Size 12 Bruno Magli shoe prints found at the crime scene. What size shoes do you wear, O.J.?
Well,
coincidence?
Well, if you go into my closet, you'll see from 10.5 to 13s. They focused on 12s.
It's coincidence. I understand.
Well, it's a coincidence, but let me ask you this, and let me ask the public this. The FBI did an exhaustive search about Bruno Magli shoes. They said it was a rare shoe. They went to every outlet that sold Bruno Magli shoes. Not one person said they ever sold me these Bruno Magli shoes. Now, they said this is a very the most exhaustive investigation of all time, right? No, I was the most exhaustively investigated person of all time. The case wasn't who bought Bruno Magli shoes. Did the FBI tell us who in L.A. might have purchased Bruno Magli shoes? If they did, we don't know about that.
Did you ever have any?
First of all, I would have never worn those ugly shoes. You know, I can't tell you. I can't tell you the name of the shoes I have on now. I think with most men. Unless they're tennis shoes, you know, Nike, you know, some make of a tennis shoe, you know the name of your tennis shoe. I can't tell you the name of any. I may have upwards of 40 pairs of shoes upstairs. I couldn't tell you the name of the shoes.
So you don't know if you ever owned a pair of those shoes?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never walked into a shoe store and asked for a named pair of shoes ever in my life.
Do you still have the 2 pairs of gloves that Nicole bought for you?
I don't know if Nicole ever bought me gloves. I never recall Nicole ever buying me gloves. Now, we do have, and the prosecution knows this, we do have discovery from friends of ours, at least one, that said Nicole bought him 2 pair of shoes. I mean, 2 pair of gloves, not these pair of gloves. At Christmas, I buy for possibly, I know, well over 100 people. Nicole normally was in charge of getting Christmas presents for various people. I would buy for my son, for AC, for Marcus Allen, you know, a few of my very close friends I would buy for. But then we had this other group of friends, and Nicole would get the list, and she'd go out and buy for them. I don't know if she bought these gloves for someone. I do know that one person did come forward and also sent the gloves that she had purchased for him. And I'm not sure of this, but I'm pretty sure that was from.
But you had them on in the photograph.
No.
At the sidelines?
I had on gloves that looked similar to them. They may have been that make, I don't know. But if you look at pictures of me on sidelines, you've seen me wear numerous gloves, numerous colored gloves. Where are any of those gloves? In those pictures, I asked you, where are any of the clothes that I wore in those
But the coincidence, I'm talking about public perception and coincidence.
Yeah.
And isn't it a coincidence that you stand in a photograph with similar gloves on to the gloves that were apparently worn by the murderer?
I don't know.
It's a coincidence, isn't it?
You can say it's a coincidence, but I submit that any well-dressed man who wears gloves, everybody in the East wears gloves. And you can walk down the street and I can guarantee you, time and time again, you'll see similar make gloves. I find it, is it a coincidence that there was no gloves upstairs? Is it a coincidence that I had one glove that looked like these gloves? As a matter of fact, I would submit to you, if I put on the one glove they found upstairs that had lambskin interior, and I stood across this room, or you took a picture, it'd be pretty difficult to tell that glove from the gloves that they said I was wearing in the photographs and trials. I also say, what happened to the other glove of that? I'm with gloves the way I am with sunglasses. I lose them. I have a thing that I do that I'm sure the prosecution in their exhaustive investigation has discovered, that every 6 months, when I'm in New York, when I leave New York, I give 90% of my clothes away. When I leave LA in August, I give 90% of my clothes away. They've investigated this. They've talked to my doormen in New York. They've talked to my house help here, that's what I do.
So if you had gloves, they're
Yeah.
they're tossed to Wind. They're somewhere.
Possibly. I really
don't know.
don't. I don't know where my black gloves are. I don't know where the other glove to the lambskin glove went. But as I say to you, they took pictures of me wearing an outfit.
Right.
I asked them, where is any single apparel, except maybe the tie I might still have, that you see, and a big coat. There's one big coat I'm pretty sure is still back in New York. Where are any of the clothes that you see me wearing in those pictures?
Okay. Who was the person that Alan Park saw walking across your driveway? Just was it 4 minutes before 11? Who was that person?
See, once again, we go to Marcia Clark, and I hope we have enough time and you ask enough questions. I'll try to shorten my answers up so that we can.
I want to hit these points that people have questions about. It was never answered. It's never been revealed who that is.
The problem is Marcia Clark. Marcia Clark has given an impression of things, and people are living with those impressions. I'm seeing the pundits on TV commenting on things that were not facts in this case. Alan Park never once said that he saw anybody walking across a driveway.
During questioning, he certainly indicated that he may have
saw
seen
someone right outside the front door of my house.
Yes.
He put an X on an exhibit to show exactly where that was, so there could be no mistaking what Marcia said and what has been repeated time and again by the pundits was not true. It was not evidence in this case. I did walk out the door. I walked out to the door right to the point where he put an X on that picture.
So that
I dropped some luggage. I took my golf bags off the bench. I dropped them there. I signaled what I thought was Dale. I thought it was my old limo driver, Dale.
Your regular limo driver.
Yeah, at that point. I didn't realize it was someone other than Dale. I don't know if that's the correct time you have it also, but I dropped that right there. Right when Cato evidently let him in, he drove up right where those two bags were sitting, is right where he put the X. That's right where I walked to, and I turned around, went back upstairs, finished up with my clothes in my bag, put a shirt on, and came right back downstairs in 2 minutes or so. It didn't take me much more than 2 minutes to do that.
Why did you lie to the limo driver and tell him you were asleep, and that's why you missed his ringing?
No, see, that's once again, Alan Park, who I felt was as honest as he could be, but I think we'll show you quite convincingly that his perceptions weren't all that reliable that night on virtually everything he spoke about that night. In this instance, I never, ever, ever said that I was asleep, ever. When I walked outside, Cato Kalin said to me, "Did you oversleep?" I saw in one report where Cato said to Alan Park when he first saw him, he must have overslept. So I'm assuming with all of this happening, Alan Park just assumed I overslept. The main reason I went to McDonald's instead of just had a bowl of cereal is because I was trying to stay awake. It was Cato who had said to me when we returned to my house, "Well, maybe you can take a nap." And I said, "Hey, I don't have time to take a nap." And I didn't want to take a nap. I was getting on a red eye. And if you've ever taken red eyes, the last thing I wanted to do was sleep before I got on the red eye because I had hoped to be able to sleep on the red eye.
What was in the bag?
What bag?
The bag that Cato Kalin, that apparently you did not let Cato Kalin put in the limousine. That's how it was phrased, and that's the public perception of what happened.
Yeah, well, that goes like someone walking down the driveway and across the driveway. It was very simple. We were packing. Cato said, "There's a bag over there," and I said, "Yeah, I'll get it," since I was going out to my Bronco anyway. I walked by the bag, didn't pick it up when I walked by, went out to my Bronco, really got the guts to my mobile phone and walked back in and picked the bag up. Actually picked up two bags. One that Cato never mentioned was a white bag that was also sitting there with balls in it. Picked both bags up, walked back to the front of the house, and at that point Cato was talking about finding a flashlight. I told him to look in my kitchen. I actually asked Alan Park to get my golf bag out, but Cato was talking about the flashlight. I walked in my front door, dropped the white bag down, which somehow got lost in all of this.
And that had golf balls in it.
That also had golf balls in it. It was right by my front door, and I believe in some of the pictures taken, you'll see that white bag there.
So what was in the black bag?
Golf balls, usable golf balls, and a windbreaker.
There was a recent story that I want to ask you about right up front, that Paula Barbieri broke up with you the night that Nicole was murdered, earlier that evening.
I learned that in jail.
What do you mean you learned that in jail? That
Well-
she had left you a message, or?
Well, yeah. Well, actually, one day we were talking about something in jail, and it came up. You know, that she was, you know, that I don't know. See, Paul and I, as she said in her, and I can't really talk about her deposition. The prosecution know full well that she left that message on a mobile cellular phone, and they also know full well that I never retrieved any messages that day.
So if she did.
Yeah, I just never retrieved it. And if I had
didn't know.
retrieved it, it was not a big deal because just a week, actually 10 days previous to that, we had gone to Palm Springs, and she said this in her deposition. I shouldn't be talking about it, but basically she was upset that I went and played golf, and she left Palm Springs and split up with me. But when I came home, I saw her, and we went on with our lives, and that probably what would have happened that day.
The jury said not guilty, but there's one thing that most everyone is sure of now, or many people are, and that is the O.J. Simpson that we saw for years on the football field, and we saw on TV commercials and in the movies. That's not the real O.J. You can't be real proud of your relationship with Nicole.
Yes, I am totally proud. There may be an incident or two in our relationship, and any person out there that can't look at one or two instances that they may not be so fond of in a 17-year relationship, they're not being honest with us. There's an instance or two in our relationship that I certainly wish had not have happened. But let me tell you about this house. This house was always loaded with people. We couldn't take a trip without all our friends wanting to go with us because we had a loving home, a loving relationship. It was always fun to be around us. That was our relationship. That was our relationship for the full time. Even the year, after being apart a year and a half, when we came back together for a year, everybody, if we took a trip, we couldn't take a trip alone. Everybody wanted to go with us because we were fun people to be with.